I've been coming to terms with the fact that some people are just extremely predictable. Like, you can look at their profile and look at what they portray or project out into the world and know exactly the types of events that they would go to, exactly the types of experiences they're more likely to seek out, exactly the types of people they're likely to want to be around. And I don't think that's a bad thing whatsoever. I think we're all projecting an image onto social media, especially, and that helps us to connect with other people who align with that. All I'm really saying is that when it comes to that, you should really never believe the hype of people because everybody is putting on a show. So, I want to welcome you back to another episode of the Reflection Hour with your host, Sydney. So, today I'm really thinking about the images that people portray and how that really affects who they connect with, who you connect with on an authentic level, and whether or not those are really the people that you want to connect with on or in the first place. And I have seen this from the opposite angle where I think in a lot of ways I am unpredictable. And I think that's great. I think it's not so great if you want to align yourself with certain opportunities and you're kind of not presenting the most united front when it comes to, oh, I'm the type of person who does X, or I'm the type of person who does Y, right? It's easy to categorize people if their image is consistent. And I think we live in an era where we want to be able to place people into designated boxes so that we almost don't have to really think about them anymore. And I think this hinders a lot of people. It especially hinders the people who move to the beat of their own drum, myself included, because I could be interested in one thing today and then interested in something that is diametrically opposed to what I was interested in today, tomorrow. And I think that makes me an individual. You could agree, you could disagree, you could say that I'm inconsistent, but I think the thing that I'm consistent in is being myself. And again, this is not to say that people are inconsistent in being themselves, but I think sometimes when people perfectly curate their lives so that it fits in a specific box or that they're seen a specific way, that it almost hinders connection because you can kind of tell that this person or these people are going for a certain look, a certain vibe, and anything that they deem to not be in alignment with that, they're going to immediately write off. And if you immediately write off something because you've decided that it is one way, how many people, places, and things could you be keeping yourself away from unintentionally because you are looking at these people and places and things from one dimension? And this is one of the reasons why I think I personally don't like friend groups. I personally don't like to fully align with classifying myself one way. I like to do things outside of my comfort zone. I like to talk to people who I wouldn't normally talk to because you truly never know until you know. That's the truth. Like, you don't know what you don't know, and you will never know if you don't give people, places, and things a chance to surprise you. And I think that is one of the best parts about living, right? Is that serendipity exists for a reason. It's fun to have experiences that you never thought you would have with people and in places that you never would have expected. And I think that's one of the major things that likely drives my own exploration. I want to push the limits on what it is that I can experience, the people that I can talk to for anthropological reasons. I'm just interested in people. And that has brought me to really interesting places and has enabled me to meet very interesting people. And I think people are always shocked when I interact with them and how I interact with them, because I think people, again, are projecting a certain perception onto you by virtue of the fact that they want to be perceived a certain way. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, but I think there is something limiting about that because, again, you're going to cut yourself off from people, places, and things that you may not even know that you're missing out on. But I guess in the same token, right? Do you really care that much? You can't meet everyone, you can't do everything. So you kind of have to decide, like, this is what I'm open to, and anything that closely resembles that or, has a flavor of that, I'm into too. But if there's this wild card, you can't experience it because you are putting people in boxes. You're putting yourself in a box. And this is, again, why I just don't think you should believe the hype, because you don't ever truly know someone or know what an experience is going to provide you with until you do it. But again, I think this is a way for people to, I guess, I don't know, like, get more clear and not have to think too much on what they're doing, who they're aligned with. It just really takes the guesswork out of it, because I think we all do have really busy lives. So it's like, if you're allowing too much noise to get in your life, it's going to hinder you from truly getting to where you want to go. And I guess I'm just kind of realizing that. And I don't think that it's personal. Like, it is personal in a sense because everyone's life is personal to them, but you don't have to take it personally. It doesn't say anything about you. It more so says something about that person's refusal to be present and to really give things a chance, people a chance. And if that's the case for those people, places, and things, it's like, do you really want to align with those people, places, and things? Like, if they are seeing you or perceiving you in one way, what's the point of trying to prove yourself to these people, to these environments? It doesn't really make any sense. And you kind of just have to let it go and almost reverse it and be like, okay, cool. Like, so you're perceiving me in this way, or this opportunity or this job is perceiving me in this way. So, I mean, it is what it is. I guess they're not for me because they don't want to try and get to know me. They don't want to try and get to understand me. And that's okay. Like, you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. And I think this really comes into play when you're thinking about friendships, when you're thinking about jobs, when you're thinking about romantic relationships. If you feel like you constantly have to prove yourself, or that someone is presenting an image of themselves that in your experience is not aligning, why are you still trying to prove yourself to these people, places, and things? It doesn't really make any sense. And I think because of how our culture is, meaning that ever since we were children, we've been socialized to essentially care about what the crowd has to say about us. It makes it very difficult for us to truly live and exist as authentically as possible, because we have been socialized to believe that we should fit ourselves in these clean boxes so that people can categorize us, and so then people can feel comfortable around us. Because when people understand who we are, or they think that they understand who we are, they feel more comfortable because they're not constantly trying to figure out what's going on and all of that. I think people actually kind of like predictable people. It just makes their lives easier. Like, it's easier to know that, oh, this is a person who goes to Martha's Vineyard every summer. I know that this person's going to be there every summer. I know they like this type of event. So I know that they're going to be at that event because it's in Martha's Vineyard and it's right up their alley, right? You just know this about this person. Versus you have the individual who, maybe sporadically goes to Martha's Vineyard. This summer they're going to Martha's Vineyard. Next summer they're going to Newport. The following summer maybe they go to Italy. Like, Or the summer after that, they're going to freaking Zimbabwe. You know what I mean? Like there's no real continuity in what it is that they are going to do, but you see that they're an exploratory person, right? They enjoy getting out of their comfort zone. And in that regard, they become predictable as that type of person. And I feel like rather than be predictable in the sense that I want to be known as that person who, for example, goes to Martha's Vineyard every summer or does this specific activity every year, I'm the type of person who does a bunch of random shit and explores a bunch of random shit. And I'm just living my life based on wherever I feel as though I am being guided to go. And I think that's the best because even if you're not predictable in the general sense, right? You're predictable in the personality type sense. Okay. And I think that that makes an individual much more authentic and much more real because I don't believe that we are meant to be so predictable, to be so aligned to a specific box. I think we should break the box, right? Like we should be living our lives outside of the box that people have created for us. And I'm thinking about this a lot as I think about brands because I think when it comes to brands, brands align themselves with lifestyles. And I believe that this is smart because when you are, as a brand, embodying a certain lifestyle, you invite people to come in and enjoy that lifestyle and your product as well, because that product is a representation of that lifestyle. And so it really makes sense. And it's kind of cool when you think about it from the branding perspective. And I'm really thinking about this as I'm moving into my new job because when I think about the lifestyle that Vineyard Vines really espouses, it's one that's preppy. It's one that is family oriented. It is one that is classy. It's graceful, right? It's put together. And that's a lifestyle that people obviously want to embody, which is why they choose to wear Vineyard Vines. And the same could be said about when I spent time at James Perse. And I noticed again the types of people who were attracted to that clothing based on the lifestyle that they wanted to embody. And it's just so interesting to me how brands do this. And I think, honestly, that as we move out of this attention economy, we're moving more into this experience economy where, yeah, anybody can start an account on Instagram or start an account on TikTok, but what container are these brands creating? What experiences are these brands creating that are signifying a lifestyle container that people should want to be a part of, you know? And I think any smart brand is looking at how to create those worlds and how to invite people into that world so that, yes, there's many options. You could be wearing this or wearing that, but people choose to wear Vineyard Vines, for example, because of the lifestyle that it invites people to be a part of. And think about this in terms of people, right? When you look at someone's profile online, what world do you get that they are sharing with you? What world are they inviting you into by virtue of their profiles? And how can you think about yourself in that regard? Like, what experience are you trying to create for people? And why is that an experience that others would want to be a part of as well? Why is that a lifestyle, a world that other people would want to be a part of as well? And I think this is where it's less about the things that you see on the surface, like the superficial things, like, oh, I'm going to this place or I'm doing that, and more about the values that you espouse. Okay. And this is very interesting. Like, you have to know what your main values are. And in everything that you do, you must embody those values. And by virtue of you embodying those values, you are creating a world that people will either want to be a part of or will not want to be a part of. And when you become so clear on the values of your world, the lifestyle of your world, you will attract those people who really want to be a part of it. And then you will also make sure to repel the people who don't want to be a part of it. And it's just cool. Like, you can think about social media from a superficial place and be like, oh my gosh, yeah, like everybody is portraying an image and like no one's really who they say they are. But if you go a level deeper, and this is why I think it's so important to have a voice and to really build something of your own, like building your own table, so that you're not heavily reliant upon others to decide who you are, because you've decided who you are and you have your microphone and you're speaking it out there into existence, and you're allowing yourself to actually be magnetized to the people who are aligned with who you are, you know? And I don't know, like, I have just been thinking a lot about this based on how I have been misperceived throughout my life and how I haven't been so predictable, and thinking about why that is, and thinking about why it feels, at least to me, that a lot of people have overlooked me or have felt as though I was not the right person for the job, or I was not the right person to be friends with, or I was not the right person to be in relationship with, based on whatever people were seeing on the surface. But it's like, it's probably a good thing to allow people to fumble you. It's a good thing for people to misperceive you, because it almost shows you how shallow that person is and how they were just looking at the surface and they didn't want to go deep. Because I think for a lot of people, going deep is scary. Most people don't go deep. Most people are shallow. Most people aren't trying to really get to know you or really get to know themselves. And if someone's not apt on truly getting to know themselves and want to portray an image, you kind of can't get mad at them for misperceiving you, because on some level they are misperceiving themselves. And we're all projecting onto each other how we believe the world is, how we believe people function on an average basis. And that's really it. So if you are choosing to instead take a different path and do something different, embody a new way of being, you have to be okay with the fact that people are just not going to get you. They're not going to get you until it's too late. And by that time, you've moved on and you've leveled up and life is different for you now. And those people who maybe didn't see your value at one point in time, now your value is so clear as day, but it's like you missed the boat, you missed the train, because people sometimes are given an opportunity to interact with people, places, and things before they blow up, but they're so concerned with being popular or being perceived in a certain way that they intentionally overlook a person, a place, a situation, because it's what's in vogue. It's what's popular. And people don't want to shake the boat too much. People don't want to be the person who took a chance on that person or that group of people or that company and be wrong because of the social repercussions of what getting something wrong can do for them, because everybody is ultimately self-focused. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just something that we should all be hyper aware of and not take personally again, because it's personal to them, but it doesn't have to be personal to you. Like, you can just move on and learn something about human psychology, learn something about how to position yourself, learn something about the way in which you want to move in the world. And I think back to a lot of my experiences where I do believe that I was highly overlooked. And I'm grateful for it, because I think a lot of times when that happens, you don't know how to package yourself. And if you don't know how to package yourself in a way that will magnetize you to what it is you truly want, you kind of can't get mad, because it's more of a communication issue and less of a external person issue. Like, I'm of the mindset that you should always take responsibility for everything in your life, even if it's something that seems like it was out of your control, because if you take ownership or accountability over your entire life, it actually is inspirational. You feel powerful because you recognize that you always have the power to change things, even if it felt like at that point in time you felt powerless or whatever it is. And that is just a better way to live life than being a victim and feeling like you can't do anything to improve your situation. That, like, because you can. There's always something that you can do to improve yourself, to be a better version of yourself. But if you're not seeing your wins as your responsibility as much as you're seeing your losses as your responsibility, then it's very hard to actually transmute the more negative aspects or the more negative energy that you may experience in your life and leverage it for something that will be much better for you. And this is why I do believe as well, and you can agree, you can disagree, I don't really care, this is my podcast, that it's almost better to be underestimated, because you can really start to form your sense of self in the darkness. And then when you're really ready and when you really feel strong in your sense of self, that's when I think that spotlight eventually comes to you. And it shouldn't ideally come to you before then, because if you get a spotlight before you're ready, it's going to end up being a curse when it was supposed to be a blessing. And when I think about myself and when I think about my life and how in 2020, when I initially started creating content online, I really wanted that to be the moment when I made it and when everything clicked into place. But that was not the case whatsoever. And I think the reason why that was not the case was because I was not ready. I didn't have the strong sense of self that I do have today. I didn't have the discipline that I have today. I didn't have the sense of clarity that I have today. And I think there were a lot of communication issues that I had when it came to me communicating to others what was important to me, where I'm going, and what I desire to create in this world. And obviously, those things come together over time. But I think the danger in something like virality is that if you get virality before you know what to do with it, it just becomes a blip, a moment in time that is squandered because you weren't truly ready for that opportunity. And you have to be ready for opportunities to truly seize them. So, wouldn't you rather take a little bit longer and really build yourself in the darkness when no one's looking, so that when you do step out into the scene, you are confident in who you are. You are confident in your competencies because you've been building them when no one was watching. It's very difficult to feel confident if you don't really know who you are. It's easy to feel confident when you know who you are and you know that regardless of how anything goes, you'll be able to handle the vicissitudes of life. I think strength of character is the most important aspect of life. And the only way that you get that is through going through things and through those experiences that you endure, exposing you and revealing you to you, because ultimately the world is our mirror. So if it feels like everybody's underestimating you, no one's giving you a chance, all these experiences that you're having just feel like it's hit after hit after hit. What is this saying about how I feel about myself and the direction that I've been going and the people that I think I should be aligning with? It says that maybe you're not being fully honest with yourself about what you want, about who you are, and about where you truly want to go. And that's okay. But ultimately, right, your reality is data. And if you take that data too personally without actually looking at it critically and saying, okay, so my reality is showcasing this to me, and it keeps showcasing this to me over and over again. Clearly, there's something going on internally that I'm not being honest with myself about. How do I start to become honest with myself about that so that I can move on from this experience or move on from these people, this way of being, and so that it doesn't continue to show up in my life? And I think that's a very grounded approach to take to one's life. I think, again, it requires a lot of self-reflection. And I think self-reflection can be hard, especially if the feelings behind it are not feelings that feel good. And I know for myself, like whenever I do these podcasts, whenever I'm really contemplating my life, and if I'm not scrolling on my phone, if I'm not constantly looking at other things, I'll have moments where an emotion will come up and it's like I just need to release it. Whether it's through crying, whether it's through screaming, whether it's through writing, whether it's through whatever it is, right? When I feel through my feelings and when I stop lying to myself, I stop trying to portray an image and instead start embodying who I truly am, life feels a lot lighter. And life feels lighter because I'm not lying to myself anymore. And so many of us, we lie to ourselves. We think that we want to be working in this industry because, oh, we really care about it. But the reality is you want to be working in that industry because of how you believe you'll be perceived if you work in that industry. And a perfect example for me with regard to this is that when I was coming out of college, right, I was under the premise that I really wanted to be in investment banking. I really wanted to be in startups, and I really wanted to do that because I thought it was so cool and I would make so much money and life would be awesome if I was making that much money and I could do what I want. And as I went down this path of doing that, I realized that I don't actually really like doing that type of work. It doesn't really align with my personality. It doesn't really align with my skill set that is dominant in my life. Like, and it's not to say that you can't build a skill set, but there's some things that are going to come naturally to you specifically versus things that are not going to come naturally to you specifically. And on top of that, there are things that you are just going to be more interested in over other things. And if you're trying to convince yourself that, no, I'm into this, ask yourself the question, is this about prestige or is this about what I truly like to do? And I essentially landed on the fact that a lot of what I was doing previously was because of how it was being portrayed to the world around me. And it wasn't really who I was. And it's funny because after I went through that whole experiment with being in investment banking, and I wasn't even really formally in investment banking. It was more so I went to demo days and I realized I absolutely don't want to do this. But as I was going through there, after I was going through that, and after I did like an internship with startups and all that, and just like saw that I'm not really as into this as I would hope to be, because I think it would make my life easier, I then started to go through these different quote unquote professions that have cachet, that have prestige, that are something that people know about, that they could easily categorize. So I made the gamut. I was like, okay, well, it's not investment banking, it's not startup, so maybe it's law. Like maybe I need to be a lawyer. So like I had interned with a lawyer and was doing that, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna apply to law school and this and that, whatever. And then quickly realized actually that's not really what I like to do either. Go into corporate sales, go into retail, go into fitness, like trying on all these different things. And I genuinely do believe that that is what your 20s are for. I think the more that you can actually try on different hats and see what fits, the better you'll be able to decipher what truly is for you. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, again, believe the hype of certain industries, of certain experiences, of certain jobs, and they are not being real with themselves, because they will reach an uncomfortable truth that maybe, just maybe, they're not living their lives for them, but they're living their lives for other people. And I think this affects way more people than even these people would like to admit to themselves. And I think this is why today, in this day and age, more people have these major career changes, or like, I'm thinking of a specific word, or like career shifts, or they just end one career and start a completely different one, because they were going down a path that wasn't for them. They were going down a path that they were told would bring them the best possible life based on the prestige, usually, and based on what has previously worked for other people. And I just find it to be very interesting, because again, it's just so easy to fall into, and I've fallen into it myself. And I'm not saying that I'll never fall into it again, but I think seeing it online in the form of how people package themselves online is just fascinating, because I think a lot of times people don't really recognize how they are falling into it, and how they are maybe cutting themselves off from authentic connections, because they are not being fully truly who they are, right? They're only presenting that version of themselves that they know is prestigious. And I think that is okay. Like, do what you want to do. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, just like I hope you don't tell me to live my life. But I do think that it stifles real connection, because you're not being fully honest about who you are and what motivates you. You're just presenting a front that you know is going to be received well. And that's cool. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about this essay from Paul Graham. So Paul Graham is a investor, and I want to say he was one of the founders of Y Combinator. I believe he was, okay. And he has this essay called, like I said, How to Do What You Love. And there's this aspect where he actually talks about jobs, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about this, right? I'm going to read an excerpt from it. By high school, the prospect of an actual job was on the horizon. Adults would sometimes come to speak to us about their work, or we would go to see them at work. It was always understood that they enjoyed what they did. In retrospect, I think one may have, the private jet pilot, but I don't think that the bank manager really did. The main reason they all acted as if they enjoyed their work was presumably the upper middle class convention that you're supposed to. It would not merely be bad for your career to say that you despise your job, but a social faux pas. Why is it conventional to pretend to like what you do? The first sentence of this essay explains that. Okay, the first sentence says, to do something well, you have to like it. The idea is not exactly novel. We've got it down to 4 words. Do what you love. But it's not enough just to tell people that doing what you love is complicated. So that was the first sentence. Okay, that's where the upper middle class tradition comes from. Just as houses all over America are full of chairs that are, without the owners even knowing it, nth degree imitations of chairs designed 250 years ago for French kings, conventional attitudes about work are, without the owners even knowing it, nth degree imitations of the attitudes of people who've done great things. What a recipe for alienation. By the time they reach an age to think about what they'd like to do, most kids have been thoroughly misled about the idea of loving one's work. School has trained them to regard work as an unpleasant duty. Having a job is said to be even more onerous than schoolwork, and yet all the adults claim to like what they do. You can't blame kids for thinking, I'm not like these people, I'm not suited to this world. Actually, they've been told 3 lies. The stuff they've been taught to regard as work in school is not real work. Grown-up work is not necessarily worse than schoolwork, and many of the adults around them are lying when they say they like what they do. The most dangerous liars can be the kids' own parents. If you take a boring job to give your family a high standard of living, as so many people do, you risk infecting your kids with the idea that work is boring. And honestly, how often do we see that? It's so interesting because I think when it comes to people that I see online who talk about how they've made their wealth, a lot of them end up in these very boring businesses and they make a ton of money. So I think that totally aligns. Maybe it would be better for kids in this one case if parents were not so unselfish. A parent who set an example of loving their work might help their kids more than an expensive house. Isn't that true? It was not till I was in college, this is Paul Graham talking, that the idea of work finally broke free from the idea of making a living. Then the important question became not how to make money, but what to work on. Ideally, these two coincided, but some spectacular boundary cases, like Einstein in the patent office, proved they weren't identical. The definition of work was now to make some original contribution to the world, and in the process, not to starve. But after the habit of so many years, my idea of work still included a large component of pain. Work still seemed to require discipline because only hard problems yielded grand results, and hard problems couldn't literally be fun. Surely one had to force oneself to work on them. If you think something's supposed to hurt, you're less likely to notice if you're doing it wrong. That about sums up my experience of graduate school. How much are you supposed to like what you do? Unless you know that, you don't know when to stop searching. And if, like most people, you underestimate it, you'll tend to stop searching too early. You'll end up doing something chosen for you by your parents or the desire to make money or prestige or sheer inertia. Here's an upper bound. Do what you love doesn't mean do what you would like to do most this second. Even if Einstein probably had moments when he wanted to have a cup of coffee, but told himself he ought to finish what he was working on first. It used to perplex me when I read about people who liked what they did so much that there was nothing they'd rather do. There didn't seem to be any sort of work I liked that much. If I had a choice of A, spending the next hour working on something, or B, be teleported to Rome and spend the next hour wandering about, was there any sort of work I'd prefer? Honestly, no. And I kind of feel that, to be honest. I'm not going to read the whole thing of this, but I do want to get to the part where it talks about prestige. Okay, so it's in this section called Sirens. What you should not do, I think, is worry about the opinion of anyone beyond your friends. You shouldn't worry about prestige. Prestige is the opinion of the rest of the world. When you can ask the opinions of people whose judgment you respect, what does it add to consider the opinions of people you don't even know? And I'm saying, like, this is the entire prestige trap, right? We get caught up in trying to portray ourselves a certain way so that we can be liked by certain people who, let's be honest, they don't even really love themselves that much, because if you're constantly trying to appear a certain way to other people, then do you really love yourself as you are? No. That's what leads people to try to write novels, for example. This is easy advice to give. It's hard to follow, especially when you're young. And that's what I was saying. Prestige is like a powerful magnet that warps even your beliefs about what you enjoy. It causes you to work not on what you like, but what you'd like to like. And I was really stuck in this for a very long time. And I would say it was honestly the majority, if not all, of my 20s. It wasn't until the end of my 20s that I got to a place where I was like, you know what? I actually really like interacting with people. I like being in a retail environment. I like being in an environment where I'm just exposed to a lot of people, because I'm an extrovert. I like that. I enjoy that. I enjoy building teams. I enjoy doing all this. But I was still stuck in the mindset that it was better for me to be interested in investment banking, for me to be interested in marketing at a startup company, for me to be interested in doing these things because of how it would make me look, to be interested in being a lawyer because of how it would make me look. So they like reading novels. This is what leads people to write novels, for example. They notice that people who write them win Nobel Prizes. What could be more wonderful, they think, than to be a novelist? But liking the idea of being a novelist is not enough. You have to like the actual work of novel writing if you're going to be good at it. You have to like making up elaborate lies. LOL. Prestige is just fossilized inspiration. If you do anything well enough, you'll make it prestigious. Plenty of things we now consider prestigious were anything but it at first. Jazz comes to mind, though almost any established art form would do. So just do what you like and let prestige take care of itself. Prestige is especially dangerous to the ambitious. If you want to make ambitious people waste their time on errands, the way to do it is to bait the hook with prestige. That's the recipe for getting people to give talks, write forwards, serve on committees, be department heads, and so on. It might be a good rule simply to avoid any prestigious task. If it didn't suck, they wouldn't have had to make it prestigious. Similarly, if you admire two kinds of work equally, but one is more prestigious, you should probably choose the other. Your opinions about what's admirable are always going to be slightly influenced by prestige. So if the two seem equal to you, you probably have more genuine admiration for the less prestigious one. And the last thing that I'm going to add about this, or the last little blurb, it says, the other big force leading people astray is money. Money by itself is not that dangerous. When something pays well but is regarded with contempt, like telemarketing or prostitution or personal injury litigation, ambitious people aren't tempted by it. That kind of work ends up being done by people who are, quote, just trying to make a living, end quote. Tip, avoid any field whose practitioners say this. The danger is when money is combined with prestige, as in, say, corporate law or medicine. A comparatively safe and prosperous career with some automatic baseline prestige is dangerously tempting to someone young who hasn't thought much about what they really like. The test of whether people love what they do is whether they do it even if they weren't paid for it. Even if they had to work at another job to make a living, how many corporate lawyers would do their current work if they had to do it for free in their spare time and take day jobs as waiters to support themselves? The test is especially helpful in deciding between different kinds of academic work because fields vary greatly in this respect. Most good mathematicians would work on math even if there were no jobs as math professors. Whereas in the departments at the other end of the spectrum, the availability of teaching jobs is the driver. People would rather be English professors than work in ad agencies, and publishing papers is the way you compete for such jobs. Math would happen without math departments, but it is the existence of English majors and therefore jobs teaching them that calls into being all those thousands of dreary papers about gender and identity in the novels of Conrad. No one does that kind of thing for fun. The advice of parents will tend to err on the side of money. It seems safe to say there are more undergrads who want to be novelists and whose parents want them to be doctors than who want to be doctors and whose parents want them to be novelists. The kids think their parents are, quote, materialistic. Not necessarily. All parents tend to be more conservative for their kids than they would for themselves, simply because as parents, they share risks more than rewards. If your 8-year-old son decides to climb a tall tree, or your teenage daughter decides to date the local bad boy, you won't get a share in the excitement. But if your son falls or your daughter gets pregnant, you'll have to deal with the consequences. Now, I find this to be very, very interesting. And I think about it in the context of my life that this is so true. Okay? It's so true. And it's so the reason why at these different colleges, whether you go to an elite school or not, they like to drive home certain industries for you to get into, okay? They like to draw home, go into finance, go into becoming a lawyer, go into becoming a doctor. Why? Because it's prestigious. And I fell victim to exploring those things for that very reason. And it wasn't until, again, I went through those things or I just got more exposed to the realities of what the day-to-day would look like that I recognize this isn't for me. The hype of this field is not living up to me personally. And it's not to say that it won't resonate with the people who really align with it, but it is to say that you could really apply that to anything. It doesn't just have to be work. What is it that you truly like to do? Who is it that you truly are? And how do you present yourself and communicate to others that, as opposed to trying to present yourself in a way that you think will help you to come off in a certain way that isn't who you truly are? So I hope that you enjoyed this message and that you're maybe reflecting on the ways in which you could embody who you are more authentically and really let go of the notion that you have to be digestible to people and that you have to have a certain image in order for people to truly like you. Because at the end of the day, if you don't like yourself, if you don't like the work that you're doing on a daily basis, who really gives a fuck what other people think about it? They're not living your life. They are not going to be dealing with the consequences of the path that you chose, the people that you surround yourself with. So you might as well get to the root of that and live a life that makes sense to you, as opposed to living a life that is prestigious and makes no real sense to you because you didn't take the time to really get to know who you are and what you truly desire. My name is Sydney. If you like this message, like, comment, subscribe, maybe share with a friend. Don't believe the hype, but instead become clear on who it is that you are, what you want, and be. We're human beings at the end of the day. We're not human doings. Everything's okay and everything will be okay, but it starts with you believing that internally about yourself. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.